So love and consciousness. Right? Hard to come up with two larger topics than that. So I want to start out with consciousness first because it's really that's really the core of it, and then we'll bring in love a little bit later. So I find it interesting in our society that, there's some people that get paid very well, right? Doctors, lawyers, professional people, right? And then there's some people that get paid extraordinarily well. Like actors, musicians, sports athletes, right? Drug dealers, got to put them in there too. So what do those have in common? So it seems like the people that we pay most, the people whose abilities we value most by virtue of what we're willing to pay them, are people that cause us to forget about ourselves for a short time. Go to a good movie, 2 hours later, barely thought about yourself, right? If you've thought about yourself during the movie, it wasn't a very good movie. If you're sitting there, I'm sitting in a big theater, not many people around. Yeah, there's something going on up there on the screen. Not a good movie. But if we're just completely lost for 2 hours, great movie. We've forgotten about ourselves for 2 hours. It's worth $15. Or we watch sports games on TV, go to concerts. So that's pretty interesting. So spirituality is like that too, except the fix isn't temporary. And what is this thing that we're trying to forget about for a short time? It's this thing that we call me, right? It's the thing that we spend our whole lifetimes trying to improve, trying to maneuver itself into a better situation, better job, better house, right relationship, security, comfort, new kitchen remodel, whatever it is that will sort of give me a little more peace, happiness, make this body, mind comfortable, happy. And there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of times in spirituality, you've all heard, it's good to be selfless, right? Selfless service. That's fine. It's just really, really hard to do when it is an ego trying to be selfless. Because why is an ego trying to be selfless? Feel better about me, right? I'm a selfless person. I'm a spiritual person. I'm a good person. I'm a religious person. However we frame it, but it's hard. Just the idea of responding selflessly. When we really look closely at it, it's tricky ground. Really tricky ground. So it's sort of a complicated state of affairs where on the one hand we're trying to improve this self, right? Make it more functional in the world, make more people like me, become more respected, become more valued to society in terms of what they're willing to pay me for what I do. I mean, so all of that is constructing this thing that we call self. And at the same time, through our religious or cultural upbringing, we've been told, well, it's good to be selfless and, love your neighbor as yourself. And, so it's sort of almost like, we do all these things in service to ourselves, and yet we're somehow made to feel guilty about it. Somehow, we're, right? It's like we're not supposed to feel good about that. The other thing that complicates it is even as we're doing that, even as we're constructing, improving, fixing, justifying this thing that we call self, at the same time there's something deeper that realizes that it's on shaky ground. Is that not true? I mean, isn't that the source of sort of deep-seated sort of anxiety, uncertainty, concern about the future? And I'd suggest that the root of that problem, the root of why is there a sort of deep-seated underlying sort of shakiness, uncertainty, anxiety about where we actually stand. At the same time, we're trying to build up this edifice, is that we know there's something deep down in us that knows that the edifice is fake. Doesn't it feel like that? When we're out in the world and we're trying to present a good self-image, right? Not my real self, by the way. It's just an image of myself that I'm presenting to the world. I mean, if we're highly functional in the world, maybe the image of myself is not too far out of line with, who I am, on a more internal level, let's say. But even then, there's a sense of unease. I'm not saying major unease necessarily, it can be that also, but just a sense of just slight discomfort. I mean, Buddha called it suffering. I mean, it can be that, but it can be just like a little rattle in your car, just sort of an annoying thing. It doesn't have to be mind-blasting suffering. It can be just like a nagging suspicion that there might be something that I'm not quite at ease with. So I'd be more comfortable with the term unease than I would be suffering necessarily. It can be suffering, sure, but there is this just sense of, all of this is going pretty well, or maybe not so well, but anyway, I'm trying real hard to keep it together, this thing that I call me. And I'm spending a lifetime doing it, and I've been told if I do it really well, the success and the relationships and the family, and if I do it really well, then I'll be happy. Right. So most of us spend the next 3 or 4 or 5, 6 decades pursuing that instruction and hoping that maybe not now, but sometime in the future, there'll be the payoff, where everything will sort of fall into place and everything will be fine. Be happy, relaxed, right job, right relationship, right career, right house, right neighborhood, right political power and power, whatever. The problem with that is things never stay fixed. It can happen where everything does fall together. Good times, there's no problem in enjoying that. But even when we're enjoying it, isn't there a sense of, yeah, this is good, but, it's not going to last forever. There's still, even when things are going well, even when all the pieces fall into place, isn't there still a little sense of, yeah, but I can't let my guard down because, who knows what might happen tomorrow. So even when things are all going well, there's still this underlying unease because things change, right? I mean, the Buddha said that also. Things are impermanent. No kidding, right? Anybody not notice that things are impermanent? That things are always changing? Not just changing on the outside. I mean, these bodies are changing. Our beliefs are changing. What things we care about change over time. I'd be willing to bet that none of us have the same ideas about life and about ourselves that we had when we were 16 years old. All of that's subject to change. And that also leads to a sense of unease. Things are always changing. I would feel much more comfortable if I was in control. Right? Control of my life, control of the circumstances around me, control of about how my kids behave. How my workmates behave. If I could just control that, then life would be good. Right? You get the feeling for this sort of shaky ground that, we spend this lifetime of effort trying to improve, polish this self. And again, there's nothing, I know in spirituality they frown on this thing called self. I think it's great. It seems like a stage that we have to go through, just like like adolescence is different than infancy, and hopefully is different than adulthood. It's just a stage that we go through. If we're lucky. If we're not so lucky, we hang on for dear life until we die. So the question arises, it's useful to see that whole pattern of what we do to create and to maintain that sense of self. And again, there's nothing wrong with it. It's useful. It's useful out in the world. It's what we get paid to do. It's functional. It gets us an income. It gets us respect. All of that. There's not a problem with it. The only issue is it enough for you? I mean, it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks, but just in your own life and your own experience, is that sufficient? And I would guess if you chose to spend a weekend doing this, the answer is maybe not. Is there something else? Or is that the sum total of existence? To sort of improve my situation for the duration of my life. Is that really, really the ultimate purpose, goal, destiny of my life? Or is there something deeper than that? So this is where, so just being willing to ask that question is really the first step on a genuine exploration. where we're really being honest with ourselves, where we're not denying, regretting, putting down anything that we're doing, but just saying, okay, that's fine. It's gotten me this far, but is there anything else? Is there anything more profound? So, and one of the ways to try to figure out what's more profound is philosophy, right? But philosophy is an exercise of the mind. It's using the mind to try to figure out what life's about. And that's, if you're inclined in that direction, great, take it all the way. Take it all the way to the point where it no longer provides sufficient answers. And again, we can ask, is there anything deeper than that? Right? Is there anything deeper than our mental effort to analyze and control life? Because life is living itself. Things happen every day, right? And then we tell ourselves a story about what happened, or what we think is going to happen, or what we're afraid might happen. All of that mental activity is at least one step removed from reality. Has to be, right? It's not, the only place it's happening is in your own head. Nowhere else in the universe. That particular interpretation of whatever it is that's happening. So there's reality, life unfolding, events happen, we act, other people act, life happens, and then we tell ourselves a story about it. What should have happened, what was the right thing to happen, what was the wrong thing, I was right, they were wrong, I screwed up, I'm guilty. All of that is a story one step at least removed from life itself. So when we occupy this place in our head where we give that the final authority, we give our mental judgment about life the final authority about what's real, we're living in an altered state. Right? We're not actually engaging in the world as is. We're engaging in it through our veil of perceptions and beliefs and ideas about how the world should and shouldn't be. We basically usurp the role of God, right? I know what's best for the world. I know what's best for me. I know what the other person should do or shouldn't have done. I know. Isn't that true? Isn't that what we sort of secretly believe? If everybody would just be like I want them to be, the world would be a better place, and I'd be happy, and everybody else would be okay too. Isn't that what we secretly believe? But it's not going to happen, right? Even if everybody else did exactly what we wanted them to do, and life just was as smooth as could be, and everything just happened for our own individual benefit, would that really be the life we would choose to live? There'd be no motivation to do anything different than you were already doing. There'd be no surprise. There'd be no, the movement of life, the good times and the difficult times. That movement is actually what causes us to look at life more deeply. Yeah. So even if we got what we really secretly wanted, we wouldn't be happy with it. So last night in the guided meditation, we began to explore this thing that we can call awareness or consciousness, right? And the way we approached it is, it's hard to go straight from telling the mind, just notice awareness. The mind has been programmed for so long that it's hard not to think through thoughts. So telling the mind to sort of become aware of awareness, it can't do that. It's not designed to do that. The mind can't stand back and look at awareness. Awareness isn't a thing. So what we did last night, we didn't try to tell the mind to do anything like be quiet for just a few minutes. What we did is actually went into the body through just direct sensory perception, right? We went in through the sensation of breathing, just noticing what's happening, sitting, hearing, sensing internal energy. All of those things are totally non-conceptual. They don't require the mind. It's just the body sensing input. It's what the bodies are really good at. Sensing organisms. It's how we move about in the world. I mean, we imagine the world is out there, right? But where the world is actually happening is in here. I mean, physiologically that's true, right? We think we see a tree over there, but actually where the tree registers itself is in here. Right? This thing in here interprets the light waves and imagines a tree and say, I see a tree. But it all happens in here. So these bodies are great sensing organisms. So we can use that. We can use that to sort of recognize this direct ability to sense into the world without going the next step of conceptualizing what we see or what we hear, what we feel. Right? It's just direct sensory perception. So that's a good way to get into something other than our thinking mind. The thinking mind might come in too, just like we did in the guided meditation last night. But when we approach it through the body, we can see that the thought is actually another object in consciousness. Right? Just like say, I look at the chair, I can also see a thought, notice a thought. So what notices a thought isn't a thought. Can't be. What notices a thought is of something of a different dimension than thought. Thought can't notice itself. It thinks, neurons fire, something is aware of that thought process. Okay? So just like we're all aware right now, right? That awareness. So I'm not talking about special, elevated, spiritual, divine, higher levels of attainment awareness. I'm just talking about this awareness that's already functioning fully right now, all of us, no exceptions. So what's that awareness? And I'd suggest it's of a fundamentally different character than objects within that awareness. And by objects, I mean everything else. Everything else. I mean these bodies, I mean these minds, I mean the chair, the tree, the sky. Our opinions, our judgments. our memories, our stories, our situation, objects within awareness, all of it. And yet there's something that notices. There's something, it's almost like a screen on which a movie's projected. Without the screen, that movie would just go out into space. It wouldn't register anywhere. It would just be nobody there to notice it, right? So it requires the screen of awareness to recognize those thoughts, recognize those feelings. And the good news is that it's already fully functional. We may have noticed it, we may have not noticed it. That's one thing. But it's already happening. It's not something we have to fix our karma to attain. It's not something we have to live umpteen lifetimes to see. It's not something that only happens to good people. Something that's already present. It's just that simple sense, right now, I exist. Human beings. Right? So it's what we already are. The effort is just to notice that that's true, that that's sort of something that we don't quite understand. It's not of the same dimension as physical objects or even these bodies. Even more subtle things like thoughts or feelings. Somehow the awareness is more primary than that. Without the awareness, thoughts don't exist, feelings don't exist, these body minds don't exist, the world doesn't exist. Might seem sort of ephemeral. But without it, nothing exists. Or if it did, you wouldn't know. So it has that going for it. And the good news, as I said, is that it's already operational. It's not something we have to hunt down, go into a Himalayan cave to find. It's something that's operational right now, right here. But we just haven't given it much credit because, well, it's always sort of there. What's the big deal? Everybody's aware. How special could it be? I want to be special. But it is of a fundamentally different character. It's like, again, last night in a guided meditation where we ask questions about it, like, well, where does it originate from? When I go to look for it, in biology they said it was here, but when my actual direct experience, I can't really quite say. Somewhere, it feels like somewhere in this vicinity, but exactly where it originates from, when I feel into it, without an idea about what the answer should be, not so sure. How big is it? How old is it? Is it male awareness or female awareness? Or is it just awareness? So when we first begin to notice that, there's some interesting questions that arise. Like, on the one hand, there is this self that requires a lot of effort and maintenance and capital improvements to keep together, right? Lifelong project to improve it, make it better. And then there's this awareness that doesn't It's just always there. It doesn't seem to require effort to be there. It may require effort in terms of us as a separate self noticing that it's there. That's true. But every time we take the time to stop and notice, like, well, I wonder if I still have that sense of aliveness right now. If we really stop and look, the answer is always, well, yeah, there it is again. Still aware, right? You can't say the opposite, right? You can't say, no, I'm not aware. Everybody get that? You'd have to be aware to say that you're not, you're not aware. So just that simple sense of, yeah, I may not have a clue about what I am really, but there is that sense of I'm here, there's a sense of aliveness, and there's a sense of sort of just I am, I'm being. I may not know what that is fundamentally, but there is that sense of being. So you could call that presence, right? Eckhart talks about presence a lot. Just that sense of being present in this moment. And again, there's a lot of effort in spirituality to try to be here now. Anybody ever succeed in being anywhere else? I mean, the worst that can happen is we think about things that may happen in the future, or we remember something that happens in the past, but that mental activity is happening here and now, right? You can't get away from it. But we don't spend much time there. I think that's the point of that teaching. We don't spend much time noticing that what's actually happening is here and present, because the mind is never here and present. It's at best a fraction of a second later, right? Something happens and we tell ourselves, oh, there was a bird. The moment's already passed, but our mind's telling us what actually happened. So this awareness is a curious thing. We can really, we can sort of like being like a young child. Like I wonder what that really is. Is it, if I have this thing called myself that I have to work at, improve, worry about, defend, justify, analyze. I have that, and then there's this thing called consciousness that's sort of watching the entire show. Which one's me? Which one are you going to bet on? You have this entity called self that's impermanent. Birth, life, death. Subject to all the ups and downs of life. Subject to change at every moment. And then there's this awareness that you can't say much about, other than there is a sense, it does have a sense of aliveness to it, right? It's not like in Zen they try to scare people a lot, and so they call it things like emptiness, the void, like, ooh, the void. But it's, what they're really pointing to is something of value. It's like empty, yes, empty of what? Empty of the sense of me. Because the awareness itself doesn't have that sense of me. It may feel personal. It may feel like closely associated with all my thoughts and feelings. It is observing that. That's true. But it's also not dependent on that. The old, Descartes 17th century French philosopher said, "I think, therefore I am." What happens when you stop thinking? You disappear in a puff of smoke, or but when we rely on the mind to define, to tell ourselves who we are, that's the position that we elevate the mind to, that it is the final judge and jury of what's real, what's important, what's right, what's wrong, how the world should be, shouldn't be. Mind's good at a lot of things. That's not one of them. You know, mind's good at logical thinking. The mind doesn't want to give itself over to this awareness. But we can become curious, like, this awareness, is that, is it possible that that's more fundamentally who I am than all this package of self that I've been constructing my whole life? That's a worthy spiritual question right there. It's Ramana's question, who am I? What am I really? That's what it's pointing to. Is it possible, the idea here again isn't to come up with a philosophical answer like, well, no, that sounds right, I think I'll go with that. I think I'll decide that what I am is awareness. That won't do you any good, right? Because that's just another belief. But it is possible to recognize that fully, not as a mental decision that you arrive at, but just as a world-altering realization that is what I fundamentally am. And there's freedom in that, right? Freedom in recognition that what I am is beyond the ups and downs of life. It sounds like that realization would remove us from life, like separate, make us aloof from life, like, this transcendent state of awareness, I can sort of hang out there and not let life touch me. When you talk about it, it can feel a little bit like that. A lot of people get lost there because it does feel like that. It feels safe. I have my castle and I can defend it. It's called awareness. And we remove ourselves from life. It's a wonderful realization because there's a freedom in it. There's a freedom of recognizing that who I am doesn't have to be propped up and fixed and maintained and justified all the time. It's not subject to what the next person tells me about who I am, or somebody at work has some rude comment. We feel bad the rest of the day. There's freedom from that because, on that relative level, sure, we can be more or less functional. But deep down, when we know that what we are is the awareness that notices the whole show, there is a freedom in that. It's not the end of the line. So a lot of people take it as the end of the line. It's not. This spiritual awakening is often talked about as the goal, right? The end point. You work and work and work, decades, meditation, day after day, and then you reach the goal. What you reach is the end of seeking. Because when you discover what you actually are, that movement of seeking for something drops away. So it's the end of seeking, but it's the beginning of a whole another journey. It's not that the journey ends. It actually, I found this very disappointing when I first heard it, but it's actually not the end of the journey. It's actually the beginning of the journey. But it's the end of seeking. And by seeking, I mean what everybody is doing. Everybody is seeking. The drunk in the gutter in the alley is seeking. Happiness, trying to get through the day, trying to feel okay, trying to make life better, if only for a moment. Still seeking. You know, the successful CEO, you know, trying to feel better about life, achievement, right? Still seeking. So it's the end of seeking. And then when it's the end of seeking, then like we become freer to actually experience life as it is. Because we're not trying to make it different. We're not trying to mold life to our own benefits. You know, it's not always about what's best for me. And that opens up a whole nother area. If it's not just about me, if life is happening, if what I am is just the witnessing of life unfolding, then it's a whole different world, right? Then how is this awareness going to move in the world? I'm still here, still in the body, right? How is this consciousness, awareness, spirit, whatever you want to call it, how is it going to move in this world? What does it do? What does it say? How does it act? It's an odd thing because, you know, up until that point, everything has been coming from a different place. It's been coming from this sense of a separate self, separate individual self, right? Separate from the world. Trying to do the best it can, go out into the world, right? Separate. And as a separate, rugged individualism, highly valued in this country, right? I'm going to make my own way. I'm going to succeed. I'm going to do my own thing. So when we start talking about operating from awareness, it feels like we're giving up something of great value. Right? Who would want to do that? You know, I've been working on this body, mind, ego structure my whole life. I've got it in a pretty good spot, right? It's worked pretty well up to this point, relatively speaking. Why would I give that up? It's a good question, right? So the spiritual seeker would say, well, I'm giving it up to get enlightened. I'm going to trade up. Why? Because I'll benefit from it, right? That's the trickiness of it. So the ego will never surrender. Surrender may happen, but not willingly. It's not actually something that we do. It's something that is that happens when we have no other choice. Right. When life sort of paints us into a corner and we have literally no, if we had a choice, we'd take it, you know. So it's only when life succeeds at painting us into a corner that we're willing to say, okay, you win. So this is the real meaning of thy will be done. You know, it sounds like we're giving God permission, like, okay, in this case, your will be done, right? As if we have that power, right? It's just an acknowledgement. It's an acknowledgement of what's already happening. We don't like to admit that because we prefer our personal, rugged individualism. You know, so we're not at all willing to give that away. But this awareness is already, has no objection to life. This awareness is present for whatever arises, right? It's there for the whole show. Good, bad, ugly, difficult, pleasant. That awareness is present for it all. It's not arguing with it. Not making judgments about what's arising in life or even what we're doing as a separate self and trying to manage things. It's okay with that too. It's not going anywhere. It's like the most loyal friend ever. Right? Who could ask for more than that? This is actually God's love. Already present. Not demanding anything. Totally accepting of whatever we do. Engaged. Curious about what we're going to do next. Not demanding that we be any different than what we already are. Steadfast. More steadfast than the best lover we ever had. So recognizing that, how does that awareness move in this world? It's no longer about what's best for me, right? We also come to realize that awareness, when we first encounter it, it feels personal. Right? It feels like my awareness, that I'm generating it somehow. But after a while, we begin to wonder whether that's true. Because it begins to feel more, it's not really our awareness, it's awareness. Now that awareness is really, it's really how source moves. Right? When we're not trying to manage it, control it, shape it to our own interest, then it can begin to move through us in ways that are surprising to us. We might find ourselves doing things that we didn't know we could do. We may find ourselves doing things that we didn't know we even wanted to do. Like running a retreat center. But it begins to move through us. So we're operating from some place that's different from our egoic structure, where it's always in one way or another more or less refined about what's best for me, what I need for my own comfort, safety, happiness, what I want. And it becomes more just in alignment with life. So it's not opposed to life. It's on board for life. Life, however, it shows up. So it may show up in the form of somebody disagreeable showing up in your object field, right? Happens. Allowing things to be as they are doesn't mean that you roll over like a doormat. Doesn't mean that you allow life to just trample over you. But it means that you're on board for life, whatever that is. And because of that, it frees you up to act appropriately to the situation. So somebody disagreeable shows up in your face, and there can be a sense of, I don't want to be in this situation, and I'll do my best to extricate myself from this situation. That's fine. That's normal. And yet, at the same time, there's no sense of that person should be other than they are. It's how the infinite is appearing there. And who am I to say that shouldn't happen? That's the difference. It's not that you necessarily like the situation. As a body mind, we're still going to have preferences. We're still going to have, our own personality. But, there's still the sense of there's life manifesting there as appearing like that. There's that, it's part of the same life, right? The same connection. We can talk about that as oneness, is really seeing that it's all one life. It appears like this here, it appears like a tree there, it appears like an animal over there. Life happening. One life, one source arising, being flavored this way here, colored that way there. Still life. And when we really see that it's one life and it is what I am fundamentally, it's not that I'm separate from it. I could never be separate from it any more than I could stop breathing for more than a few seconds. When we really see that, then, we'd no more, drop a hammer on someone else's toe than we would on our own toe. It just wouldn't make any sense. It's not because it's the right thing or the good thing or the religious thing or the spiritual thing or something that I would do because I'm a good person. It just doesn't make any sense. And this is what we're approaching now could be called love, right? Love is used in a lot of different ways. But it's really just this sense of deep caring. I mean, just outpouring of for no purpose. It's not something that we have to drum up to feel good about ourselves or because it's a spiritual virtue. It's something that's the natural outpouring of what's true. What's true is who we are. What's true is that life is flowing through us. It's the one life appearing in many, many different manifestations. Life discovering itself through form. And that joy of that witnessing of the immense possibilities of life is love, is where that originates from. It's not something that we do, it's something that consciousness is. I mean, it's something that's a natural outpouring of consciousness itself. And that movement has energy, it has affection, it has compassion. It's all of the spiritual virtues that we try to practice. We can practice them, that's fine. But where they become real is when we recognize what life actually is. When we recognize that, there is a natural outflow, outpouring towards life, towards each other. Because there's no separation. When separation is absent, love exists. When we identify ourselves as a separate person, we can be conditionally loving. We can try to be more loving. That's fine. But there's something even deeper than that, where it's not dependent on the other person's behavior. It's not dependent on the circumstance. Our own peace is not dependent on what's happening. We're on board for life. Without conditions, it's not like we're even having to accept life, you know. Because to say that means, well, you know, I have some resistance, but I'm going to try to accept life. It's not that. It's like being on board for whatever arises. And that's the freedom. That's actually the surrender. Surrender sounds like we're giving up something of great value. What we're giving up is our resistance. Ego is resistance. It's all the ways that we tell ourselves that how life should be and how I should be. And it's our argument with life. That's what we give up. It's not even real. It's just a fabricated thing. But we're holding on for dear life. It's just, we don't even have to we don't have to try to get rid of it, right? Trying to get rid of it gives it a reality that it doesn't actually have. It's just seeing that the whole thing is a construct. The whole thing. Not that it's bad, it's just not true. And the freedom is actually coming into alignment with life, because then we're not in opposition to it. We're not in opposition to whatever appears. We're open. Just like awareness is already doing with us. Exactly the same. No such thing as forgiveness, right? To forgive something, you have to judge it first, right? You have to say something shouldn't have happened, but I'm big enough, I'm going to forgive that, right? It's deeper than that. It's like being in alignment from the get-go. So this is really non-separation from life. This is really, it's really being fully in love with life, fully present, not wavering. Not because we're trying real hard not to waver, just because we recognize that's what's happening. You know, and any argument with that separates us from life itself. Why would we do that? We're not doing that because it's a virtuous thing that's going to get us points. You know, we're doing it because that's how things are. It's actually quite simple. And that movement of consciousness in the world is how consciousness moves, is loving, is compassionate. It's not something that we do. It's not something we try to do. But when I talk about life moving, the entry point is really awareness, is really noticing that that's already happening, that awareness is already present. It's already non-judgmental. It's already willing to be on board for whatever we choose to do. It's not judging. Mind judges. Awareness doesn't judge. Beautiful. Good news is it's already there. It's already present. It is our connection with the divine. It's not even a connection. It is what we are already. The difficulty is admitting to ourselves that immensity.